friends, and welcome back to our channel. Today I'm going to talk about our experience getting Spike neutered and share some practical tips on how to best care for your kitten before and after the surgery. I feel like kitten neutering is one of those weird things where in passing or in casual conversation, people will talk about it as if it's no big deal, easy peasy, but it's actually a fairly stressful procedure for both the kitten and the kitten owner. Before we got Spike, I did a lot of research on how to take care of him before and after the surgery, but now having gone through it, I feel like there are a lot of random tips online that in theory sound nice but aren't very practical. Knowing what I know now, having gone through it, I just kind of wanted to share our experience from start to finish and also share some of my tips on how to make your kitten's experience as comfortable as possible. First and foremost, of course, you should always listen to your vet. Your vet will give you some basic guidelines for after and before the surgery. So before the surgery, our vet had told us to stop feeding Spike after 10 p.m. the night prior to his surgery. This is a very, very important piece of instruction to follow because if your cat's stomach isn't empty, he or she could aspirate food during the procedure and potentially be at risk of dying. So I know it's tempting to try to give them like a little treat the morning of to comfort them, but this could put them in real danger come surgery time. Instead of using food to comfort Spike the morning of, we actually just packed his carrier with a plushie he likes to sleep with and our own pieces of clothing because cats take a lot of comfort in familiar objects and smells. Another random tip unrelated to neutering that I have for you all is to just leave your cat's carrier out in the open so that they can sit in it or sleep in it during the day. Ever since we got Spike, we've been leaving his carrier out in the open so that he can kind of just sit in it or sleep in it during the day. And now he's not scared of it whatsoever. Actually, he loves sitting in there and he doesn't get scared when it's time to go to the vet. Okay, so back to neutering. The day of his neuter, we then brought him to the vet around 7 a.m. I don't know if this is typical, but the vet had us come bring him in really early so that they could run some blood tests on him and make sure everything was okay before he went to surgery. And after we dropped him off, the vet then told us we could come pick him up in a couple of hours, more so towards the end of the day so that they could also monitor him a few hours after the surgery. We got a call from the vet around 3 p.m. and shortly after went to go pick up Spike. So they sent him home with the infamous cone and a set of instructions that actually just recommended use of the cone but didn't specify how long to keep it on or even require it. If your vet gives you similar instructions, I would highly, highly recommend leaving it on for a decent amount of time, probably like somewhere between 5 to 10 days, because if your cat doesn't have their cone on, they could be licking their sutures, which is the easiest way for it to get infected. Naturally, even when Spike had his cone on, he was trying to lick his sutures, so I'm really glad that he had that, otherwise I'm sure he would have gotten an infection. I will also say Spike absolutely hated the cone. I was actually really nervous when we first brought him home because he was thrashing all around the apartment. He was actually starting to slam into walls because he was so desperate to get it off of him. But I promise you, if your cat does this, it won't last very long. I know it's tempting to take the cone off when you see your cat in so much distress, but it's not worth it. Just leave the cone on and they will get used to it. For Spike, he probably got used to the cone in about maybe 4 hours or less. But either way, that evening, you know, once he got accustomed to it, he kind of just gave up trying to take it off, and he did kind of adapt and learn how to eat and drink with the cone on. And then for most of that first evening, he kind of just laid in his bed. So another piece of instruction that we got from our vet was to limit Spike's activity as much as possible. When the vet first told me this, I was like, oh my gosh, like how am I supposed to limit this little guy's activity? He acts like he drinks 5 Red Bulls a day. But actually on day 1, it wasn't too hard because he really was just kind of still loopy and tired from the anesthesia. So he mostly just kind of laid in his bed and slept for most of the evening. However, on day 2, he was actually totally fine, completely back to normal. It seemed like he was really ready to play. So here's where I want to kind of sort through the tips that I read online, some of which I tried that absolutely did not work for me, and some of which worked really well. So the first tip I read online was to confine your kitten in one room or one space in the house or apartment. So I ended up moving all of his food and water and litter box in the same area of the apartment. But this actually ended up stressing him out even more. He actually, poor guy, went looking for his food in its original location and then got even more stressed. So I actually just ended up aborting that entire idea, and I've just put everything back where they're supposed to be, and he seemed to calm down a lot. What ended up working better for us was to really just put all of his toys away so that he wasn't tempted to run around with them and play with them and kind of become really hyper. Again, he was not too happy about having nothing around to play with, but again, it's only for a couple of days and it's worth preventing the potential injury or infection that could occur. But of course, kittens will be kittens, so even though his toys weren't out, there were moments where he had spurts of energy and was just trying to jump on the counters and the cat tower. But if this happens to your kitten, don't stress, don't freak out. Again, they will be kittens and they will want to expend their energy. I don't think it's really possible to keep them completely immobile unless you lock them in their carrier, which of course I didn't think was a great idea. As long as you're kind of monitoring their play and making sure they're not jumping super high or doing anything that might rip open their sutures, I think it's okay to give them some freedom to kind of walk around the apartment as long as you are keeping an eye on them. Another tip I wanted to share, not something I read online, but something we thought would be useful, was to put cardboard boxes on the sink. Spike does really love to hang out in the sink and play in there. So we just kind of put some cardboard boxes on there. It did feel a little bit clumsy taking them on and off every time we wanted to use the sink, but it did prevent him from sitting in there. Another tip I read online is to change out your kitten's litter box if you're using clay litter to some sort of shredded newspaper or pine pellets. I know some cat owners already use pine pellets. For us, we use clay litter, so we did consider this, but the more and more I was reading about this, the more I saw people talking about how their vet had recommended it, but then because of the sudden change, their cat would get stressed and just not use the litter box altogether. So our vet actually didn't give us any specific instruction on the litter. So what we ended up doing was we just made sure to clean his litter twice a day instead of once a day to make sure it was extra super duper clean and so that his doo-doo wouldn't give him any unwanted infections. So for the next few days, we really just stuck to the same routine. No toys out, just closely monitoring his movement, cleaning his litter box twice a day, and then just making sure he wasn't doing anything that would potentially injure him or make his healing process slower. Because the vet didn't give us specific instructions about his cone, we didn't really know when exactly to take it off. So what we did was just monitor his sutures from day to day. And on day 5 or 6, his sutures looked really good. They were closed, they were dry. So at that point, we felt it was safe for us to take off the cone. And once we took off the cone, he actually didn't really seem interested to lick his sutures at all, so we felt it was safe to keep it off at that point, and then also start reintroducing some of his toys. So I have to put in a disclaimer that male neutering is a much less invasive procedure than female spaying. So if you do have a female kitten, the recovery process may look fairly different from Spike's recovery process, and I would definitely talk to your vet about strategies you could use to make your kitten's recovery process as smooth as possible. But all in all, everything went fairly smoothly for us, aside from the initial day where Spike was kind of really scared and thrashing around in his cone. For the most part, he was pretty well behaved throughout the entire 6 days that he was wearing his cone, and there were no complications after that. That wraps up this video. I hope that it was helpful for you all. Please feel free to leave any comments and questions down below. And as always, I appreciate you all and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye all!